What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Awesemo Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And today I am here with my good friend Nick Lepri. As always, it seems like covering all these different topics, all the divisions, all these players you want to hear about. And today we're going to be talking about players that have all sorts of hype heading into 2022 and whether that is justified or not. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. As you know, I woke up literally like 5 seconds ago and I was late to the recording, but it is what it is. We're here to have a great time, and I'm very excited to talk about this topic and the players that we're hyped about, and then some players that maybe we're not so hyped about.
Yeah, so this video is mainly going to be players that are hot names in the media right now, hot names in the fantasy football community, and whether they deserve that hype or not. We will be referencing Underdog's ADP. So if the ADP on Yahoo, ESPN, wherever you use is a little bit different, that is why we are using
Yeah.
Underdog. And before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to this channel, and hit that notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. Nick, we're going to start with some players that we are excited about. You ready to get into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we're going to begin with a player that you are particularly excited about, a player who is very much deserving of the hype, in my opinion. It is Travis Etienne. The story with him is basically all injury related. This was a guy who came off the board inside the first round of the NFL draft last year to a different regime. This was under Urban Meyer, but the GM is the same. And they just don't have a lot of depth on the team right now. Unfortunately, they lost James Robinson to a torn Achilles at the end of the season. And right now, the depth chart behind him is players like Snoop Connor, it's Raquel Armstead. I don't really see a way that Jacksonville can get away from using Travis Etienne in a 3-down workload. When we look at the Underdog ADP, he is a name that's rising right now, RB 18, ADP of 48.2, but he's still behind a lot of players like Cam Akers, Ezekiel Elliott, James Conner, Javonte Williams. And I think there could be an argument that he should be up among those names, if not higher. So talk to me about Travis Etienne.
Yeah, Travis Etienne's ADP has risen 6 spots over the last month, and I think by the time we get to August, his ADP will probably rise even further. Right now, where he's going is around the fourth round turn into the fifth round, coming off the board as running back 18. I just think that people are sleeping on the fact that Etienne, like you said, is probably a full 3-down back that you can get in the fourth, fifth round, which just it's kind of insane, right? Because the running backs going around him, there's a lot of uncertainty in my opinion. Whereas I am pretty certain that Travis Etienne is going to be the lead back on the team. He's on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Sure, the Jacksonville Jaguars are not this amazing team, but you can just look back a couple years ago. We saw James Robinson absolutely fucking dominate in terms of fantasy football, and he was on a Jaguars team that is probably worse than the team that we have right now. I understand that Urban Meyer is no longer there, right? He's the guy who drafted Travis Etienne. I don't even think Urban Meyer should have drafted Travis Etienne, but we're here now in 2022. Etienne is the starting running back of the Jaguars, and James Robinson is probably not going to be okay. Right? He's probably not going to be good for multiple weeks into the season. Maybe he doesn't even play at all during the season. And that makes me very confident that Etienne is going to be good to go. Now, Etienne's injury was something that is somewhat serious. He missed the whole season, obviously, with a mid-foot Lisfranc injury. I'm not a doctor, but it's not that big of a deal based upon everything that I've read. He missed the whole season, but he will be perfectly fine this season. That's not something that should impact him. There's no real metrics to look at for him from the NFL level because he didn't play at all. But in college, this guy was very talented. And I think that from what I've seen out of him at Clemson, I feel very confident that even in Jacksonville, he could be in for a humongous workload and potentially finish as a top 10 back, especially with the receiving upside that he has.
Yeah, I mean, he checks every box. Good size, good speed, production in college as a rusher, caught over 30 passes as a junior, 48 passes as a senior. So he checks that box as well. But to me, it's James Robinson. If you were looking at betting markets, the favorite would be him playing 0 games this year. He tore his Achilles in week 16, and I know people's judgment has become a little clouded by the Cam Akers recovery, which is very much an anomaly. I don't think James Robinson plays at all this year, and they'd probably need to make the playoffs for him to even get close. But if he has a freaky recovery, I still am not sure it matters. We saw Akers be very inefficient in his return. So I'm with you. I think Travis Etienne is a supreme value right now. A player that I kind of want to talk about that I personally believe the hype in myself is at the wide receiver position. It's Michael Pittman. He's been rising up draft boards rapidly. It was around the NFL draft time where this guy was coming off the board inside the 20s among wide receivers. Now he's wide receiver 14 with an ADP of 30.6. I think this is largely because Pittman put up a solid season under Carson Wentz, and now you just have an influx of talent coming in with Matt Ryan, who historically has been a much better passer than Carson Wentz. So right now, without any competition in this offense, I mean, we're talking Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell as the top competition. Pittman should be in line for not only a monster workload target share wise, but also more efficient targets under Matt Ryan. Is he a player that you also like?
Yeah, he is a player that I like. He's not a player that I would say that I'm all in the hype train with based upon where he is going in drafts. It does make me a little bit nervous to take him as the wide receiver number 14, but I certainly do see the upside as a top 12 guy. Like you said, going from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan is like a humongous leap. Carson Wentz really wasn't that bad last year. I'm not here to just completely destroy Carson Wentz's career. But in reality, Matt Ryan is significantly better. And this is a guy that got over 1,000 receiving yards last year. He showed me enough last year to believe that he is the clear alpha number one guy in this offense. I understand they have Jonathan Taylor. I understand they're going to try to run the ball. But at the end of the day, he is still the number one guy in this offense. And I think the weapons around him just really are not concerning at all I don't think they're going to take away any of his targets.
No, I don't think they are either. And when you look at his efficiency with Carson Wentz, he was 15th in yards per run at 1.95 with Carson Wentz. And I mean, we're talking elite receivers. The players ahead of him, we're looking at Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Tyler Lockett, Jamar Chase, the really elite players in the NFL. So he's on the crest of becoming one of those players from a yards per route run perspective. Going into another year in the league, I think he can personally do it. But right now, ADP of 30.6. I understand it's a little rich. The one thing I'll say about that is you're very much entering the wide receiver dead zone. So you're betting on players that have questions. For him, it's can he actually ascend to become one of the elite talents? Behind him, you have Jalen Waddle. I think it's just target competition there. Can he get enough targets with Tyreek Hill? Behind him, DJ Moore, quarterback related, Marquise Brown. What's that offense going to look like when D-Hop is back? Sutton, he's a player that hasn't gotten back to the level of efficiency he showed pre-injury. And then most of the other players on this list, Deontay, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, it's all quarterback concerns. So to me, he has the least amount of concerns among all those players, and he's the player I would be drafting the highest. Anything else to add?
No, not really. I think that Michael Pittman definitely did prove enough to where you'd want to draft him there. I just typically, in that range, I'm looking to draft a running back.
That makes sense. All right, let's go to a player you do not believe the hype in. You're going to stick with the running back position for your pick. It is Kenneth Walker. So he is a player that is coming off the board with an ADP of 88.9. That is RB28. He's coming off the board just ahead of Tony Pollard, just ahead of Cordarrelle Patterson, Damian Harris, and Kareem Hunt. Talk to me about the rookie and why you do not believe in the hype this year.
Yeah, the reason why I don't believe in the hype in Kenneth Walker really has nothing to do with the player that I think he could be at the NFL level, right? His stats from college, especially last year, were amazing. He had 263 rushes, 1,600 plus rushing yards. He had 18 rushing touchdowns. Sure, he's not this elite receiving running back, right? He had 13 receptions on 20 targets for 89 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. He was 21 years old last year, entering the NFL. He's going to be 21 years old. And I'm not really worried about the skill set that he has. If you watch the tape, you can clearly see that this guy's a good running back. He's fast as fuck. He ran a 4.3 840, which is 98th percentile at the running back position. So there's really no worries at all about speed, about how he could transition into the NFL level. What I am worried about personally is the team that he is on and the fact that I don't really think Pete Carroll cares about the draft capital when it comes to having drafted this guy inside of the second round. I really think Pete Carroll, if Rashad Penny starts off on the right foot, if Rashad Penny is looking good in practice, if week 1 they split him 50-50, if Rashad Penny looks better, then I really think that Kenneth Walker is going to struggle to see a huge workload in this offense. So I'm just looking to stay away strictly based on that. Again, it has nothing to do with his skill set. I just personally would not be surprised at all if Rashad Penny was the lead back on this team for a majority of the season. And Rashad Penny is going a lot later right now compared to Kenneth Walker. So I'm pretty out on Walker right now.
Yeah, I would just rather have other players in this area. You can draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire slightly ahead of him. Miles Sanders just a couple picks ahead of him. They both have locked-in workloads. You can draft Cordarrelle Patterson after him. And an Atlanta backfield that's probably not very good, but he should be the number one back, really without question. And I don't really know that Atlanta is going to be worse than Seattle when you just look at how these teams project this year. And Cordell Patterson has a far more clear receiving workload than Walker. So I'd rather have him later. I think you can make the debate with some of the later players, but to me, I think he's probably a little bit overrated. I'm going to end up with a little Walker, but I'm hoping to grab him more later in the offseason when he falls in ADP on Underdog. And speaking of Underdog, we've been referencing their ADP all show. That is because they're the best place to play fantasy football over the summer months. And they just unveiled Best Ball Mania 3, which has a $10 million prize pool. Yes, $10 million. All you have to do is draft a team. There's no waivers, there's no trades, there's no in-season management. Underdog is just going to give you your best score every single week, and then the best score at the end of the season wins. Last year's Best Ball Mania Championship 3 team was drafted in June, so there's no time to wait. They're also going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you use the promo code Awesemo. That's good for 4 additional entries into Best Ball Mania 3. All you have to do is head to underdog.com, find them in the App Store, or you can even click the link in the description of this video. Use the promo code Awesemo and take advantage of that promo. All right, we're going to continue with players that we don't believe the hype in. So you had Kenneth Walker. I'm going much higher in drafts where I think the hype may have gotten out of control. This is a player I do like from a prospect profile. It's DeAndre Swift. But when we look at where he's going among running backs, for DeAndre Swift, you have to take him inside the top 10 backs. He's coming off the board at RB8. So that's an ADP of 17. That's just ahead of Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb. I would rather have all those players with the exception of maybe Nick Chubb ahead of DeAndre Swift, and I'll tell you why. I understand the pass catching role for Swift is there. He's on a bad team, so he should be catching a lot of passes. First thing, on a bad team, he's not going to have as many scoring opportunities, and he's also playing in a touch share with a larger back in Jamal Williams, who plays more on the goal line. Then you right behind him, you have players in the exact same role on much better offenses expected to score more points. Aaron Jones, he plays the exact same role as DeAndre Swift. He's been better from an efficiency perspective, and he's on a better team with a team that lost a bunch of targets in Devontae Adams. Alvin Kamara is suspension related, so I won't talk too much about him. But Leonard Fournette, Saquon Barkley, those are 2 players that have shown a 3-down workload in the past that DeAndre Swift just never has. You're not going to agree with me on this pick, but I'll ask you what you think about DeAndre Swift either way.
Yeah, and I'm going to disagree, but I'm not here to just tell you, oh, look at this guy, what a fucking idiot, right? Thinking that DeAndre Swift isn't going to be good, right? Because I understand the arguments that you are making. I am not all too worried about the touchdowns, if I'm being honest. In 13 games last year, he scored 7 touchdowns, and that made him finish in a points per game perspective as running back number 8. And that's basically where he's going off of the board right now. So as long as he doesn't just score like 4 touchdowns, I'm just really not that worried at all. I think that the receiving upside there just means so much to me. Like if he plays a healthy season, I wouldn't be surprised if he got over 100 targets this season. He got 78 targets last season in just 13 games, which is 6 targets per game. There's really such high potential for him in half PPR and full PPR that I'm willing to understand the fact that Jamal Williams is going to probably vulture a couple touchdowns and that Jamal Williams could steal at least some value from him. But a lot of running backs now in the top 2 rounds, there is someone behind him. There's not that many true quote unquote workhorse running backs in the NFL anymore. I understand why you might be a little bit nervous about him, but I'm very confident in DeAndre Swift and I'm fine taking him in the early 2nd round, even slightly ahead of his ADP right now, 205.
So do you prefer him to Aaron Jones?
Yes, but it was by a wide margin, I think, last time we discussed it, but I have moved them around a little bit.
Yeah,
I think
that's not something I can do. Because he's been worse than Aaron Jones from an efficiency perspective. He scored 7 touchdowns. I think that's on the higher end of his outcomes. If I were a betting man, I would bet for negative regression there, especially because Jamal Williams missed a large chunk of last year. And if you isolate games they were healthy, they were very much in a timeshare. So I even think the 6 targets per game may be a little bit elevated for DeAndre Swift. To me, it comes down to they're the same player essentially, but one's more efficient and one's in a better offense. Once you get behind them, I can see arguments for it, but ranking Aaron Jones below DeAndre Swift is a little bit crazy to me. And if you could guarantee me all 17 games from Kamara, I would easily put him ahead of Swift too.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I mean, Kamara right now, the reason why he's ranked so low has to be because the fact that people think he's going to get suspended, right? Because otherwise he should probably be ranked as a top 6 back, I would think.
Yeah, I think you're right there. We're going to go to players deserving more hype. So this is kind of similar to players that we already believe the hype in, but we're looking more so at players that are coming off the board a little bit later than they should be, and players that we believe should be getting more hype in the media, not that are already getting hype. Your player is Josh Jacobs, who's a very polarizing player to talk about this offseason. He's coming off the board RB22 with an ADP of 62.4 on Underdog. He's the running back for Las Vegas. They made a couple interesting decisions this offseason. They decided not to pick up his option. They drafted Zamir White with decent, not great draft capital. And all that suggests to me that this could be a potential timeshare. But tell me why you think he should be deserving more hype this offseason.
Yeah, now you say that that might suggest a timeshare. I think that could suggest maybe they just run him into the ground. Just keep handing him the rock. Hey, you're gone next year. Let's keep running the rock with him. And the one thing about Josh Jacobs that I, for years, could not stand Josh Jacobs because you draft him and there's all these talks like Gruden would talk about how, oh, he's going to get more targets. And then he doesn't. And then last year, finally, he does see more targets. He saw 64 targets, 4.3 per game, ranking 9th at running back. And he had 54 receptions, 3.6 per game, 5th at running back. And just getting those receptions means a lot to me because years prior, both of those seasons, you can combine the amount of receptions he had, and it was less than what he had last year. So getting that boost in the receiving yards, receiving receptions as well is very important to me. I think that people are sleeping on Josh Jacobs strictly because the fact that they declined the 5th-year option. People are going to get nervous. I'm not nervous at all. Again, Josh Jacobs isn't the sexiest player. He's not a guy that when you watch, you're like, damn, I'm so happy I drafted Josh Jacobs. But I think at the end of the season, based upon where he's going, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he finished as like running back 14 or 15. And coming off the board in the 6th round is running back 22, and his ADP is falling. I don't understand why people don't like Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to the uncertain workload. So I understand your argument for thinking he's going to get the work, but it's tough, especially when you look at the targets coinciding with a lot of the Kenyon Drake injury. Mm-hmm. And again, it doesn't seem like that's a role they necessarily wanted him to take. And when he was given it, I mean, opportunity is the end all be all. But last year, when he was given the opportunity out of necessity, he was just average 1.19 yards per route run. That was 25th among running backs that had 30 targets. So we're talking about a very much replacement level pass catcher. Kenyon Drake didn't have a high enough sample to qualify for this. But to me, he's the superior pass catcher on the offense. And I think they would prefer him in that role. So at the very least, Jacobs is splitting work on pass downs. Now, can Zamir White carve out a role on early downs? I think that's a much bigger question. And that's where I can see your argument making a lot of sense. To me, it comes down to Jacobs. He's going ahead of Antonio Gibson, Elijah Mitchell, A.J. Dillon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Couple names I might prefer over him, but I think his ADP is pretty palatable right now. What do you make of the players he's going around?
Yeah, I definitely like him more than all the other players. I think Elijah Mitchell is going to be the most confusing player we have to talk about all offseason because I wouldn't be surprised if they signed me and I was the number 1 running back on their team, right? Because that's just what they do. They just sign some random guy off the street and then he leads the team in rushing. So you never really know with them, and that's going to be probably a conversation for another video. But I like Josh Jacobs definitely the most out of that grouping. And I just really think that he is good enough to just hold his own on the field. Maybe he's not in there 70% of the time, but if he's in there 65% of the time, then I think he could still end up finishing inside of the top 18.
That makes sense. The player I want to talk about that is deserving of more hype this offseason that's not really getting it is Brandin Cooks. And similar to last year, this isn't going to be the sexiest name in your fantasy drafts, but Brandin Cooks, Houston wide receiver, had a phenomenal year playing with Davis Mills. He got Tyrod Taylor for a game, but I mean, just not the quarterback situation we wanted, not the quarterback situation we expected. And now he's in the same situation. They retain their OC, Pep Hamilton, who was able to do a lot with a little, and he's still coming off the board wide receiver 29. He's coming off the board with an ADP of 57.6. And I think there's a notion that this guy is getting up there in his career. He's done nothing but turn in 1,000-yard seasons, and he's still not even 30 years old. He's going to be 29 during the season this year. So very much maybe towards the end of his prime, but still in it to me. When I look at ADP, he's coming off the board behind players like Rashad Bateman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chris Godwin. I think that's a little more injury related, so we'll get a clear idea of that later. But when we compare him to Rashad Bateman and Juju Smith-Schuster, Rashad Bateman is the wide receiver 1 in his offense, but he almost certainly is going to see less opportunity than Brandin Cooks. And he also needs to prove that he can play efficiency-wise on the same level as Cooks, which he did not do in his rookie year. Now, Rashad Bateman, first-round pick, there's a good chance that he does get to that efficiency mark, but Brandin Cooks has shown it year in, year out in his career, and Bateman has never shown it. With Juju Smith-Schuster, I just cannot bet on a guy that has basically he has a base salary of $1 million. He had a $1.5 million signing bonus. Maximum he's going to get paid is $3 million. For reference, when we look at other players in the offseason that got paid, like Russell Gage, his contract is over $12 million with upwards to be like $30 million in total if he plays every single year. So you have Russell Gage like getting a maximum of $30 million and Juju Smith-Schuster got $3 million. I cannot fathom drafting Juju Smith-Schuster ahead of Brandin Cooks right now. That is unbelievable to me, but am I crazy on this? Do you agree?
Oh, I definitely agree. I fucking love not Juju Smith-Schuster, Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks, 6 out of 8 years, over 1,000 receiving yards, and he's doing this on every team in the NFL. He's like Ryan Fitzpatrick. He stops by with the team for a couple of years, then gets away. He's been on how many teams, right? Like 4 or 5 at this point, it feels like.
Yeah, I think this is his 5th team, which we can check really quickly, but to your point, you can go ahead, go on.
Yeah, he's been on so many teams in the NFL, and he just keeps performing. I understand he's on the Houston Texans. I understand it's Davis Mills, but Davis Mills, the guy with the huge neck, is a little bit better than people give him credit for. Again, I don't think he's the franchise quarterback of the Texans, but he's a little bit better than people give him credit for. And Brandin Cooks is just the clear number 1 on this team. Last year, he was 12th in targets. I think that this year he could easily be in that range yet again. He was 13th in receptions. He was 20th in receiving yards, 20th in touchdowns. I don't expect him to score a crazy amount of touchdowns. I think his numbers are just going to be elevated by his consistency every single game, seeing a bunch of targets as well as receptions. So really, when it comes to Brandin Cooks, again, like you said, he's not a super sexy name. When you draft Brandin Cooks, you're not thinking, oh shit, this is a guy that can finish as a top 5 wide receiver. But to me, I'm thinking, you know what? This is a safe wide receiver too that I'm getting very late in the draft compared to where I think he should be going. People are starting to catch on, though. His ADP last month on May 11th was 68, and now his ADP is all the way up to 57.90. So people have caught on a little bit, but he's still going underdrafted, in my opinion, in the late 5th round. And if you're playing with a lot more casual people, right, not everyone is playing with the sharpest of knives in the fucking cupboard. So I think that there's leagues where Brandin Cooks is going to go significantly later. So I like Brandin Cooks a ton. And he's a guy that actually was pretty efficient last year. He was ranked 15th in target separation and was 11th in dominator rating. What does dominator rating mean? It means a receiver's percentage of total team receiving yards and team receiving touchdowns. So he dominated that offense in Houston.
Yeah, he was 14th in yards per route run for all receivers that had at least 100 targets. That was just one place ahead of Mr. Michael Pittman, who we already talked about in this video. So please, people, quit drafting Juju Smith-Schuster as a top 25 wide receiver, the $3 million man, getting paid 10 times less than Russell Gage throughout their entire contracts. But that'll do it for us. Let us know in the comments section who you guys like, who you think is either overhyped or they're a player that's not getting enough hype. I will be back with Nick all next week for all sorts of topics. So Nick, anything you want to say to the people before we get out of here?
Yeah, just make sure that when you guys draft Juju, you're getting a point per TikTok because, man, he's dominating those kind of leagues.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. He is Nick Lepri on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. I am Matt Gajewski on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. We will see you guys later. Have a good day.